So in this video we're going to go through bridle joint. This is the beginning of the more advanced joints where you've got 3 interlocking pieces of timber, or the timber is divided into 3 and it interlocks rather than a half lap joint. These are much more stable and this is more advanced joinery, and this is the beginning point. The beginning point is from a bridle joint. So if you're interested in that and you want to get ahead, let's get into this. We're going to be cutting it. I'm going to be showing you the combination marking gauge and how to use that as well. And follow right the way through the video, because as I cut through all the pieces, I'm going to give you hints and tips to get it as accurate as possible and save yourself a load of work by measuring twice, cut once, and all of that. All good stuff right the way through. Let me know what you think of it. Love to hear the comments. Happy woodworking. We're going to mark out a couple of different types of timber here, an oak and a pine, and I'm going to measure this one up to be 180 mil. That's my 180 there. That's my 180 there. Because this is just a practice joint, you don't have to be too precise on the length, but you do need to be precise on the marking out. So do put your face and edge markings on it. Face and edge, face and edge. When the same as what we've done in all the half lap joints, take your tri-square and always have the body against a face or an edge. When you mark out off a tri-square, it's always best to do it on the outside, not on the inside. Because if I wanted to look around that timber, you could see the other side of it there as well. It's more evident here. When you're looking down this side, we can see here and we can see here. If we were to do that on the inside, you wouldn't see it. So I'm often seeing people marking this up on the inside. 95% of the time, you'd mark it on the outside. Easier to see, easier to work with. Did I do that 180? I got that marked out. For beginners, marking your timber square all the way around, you only need to use the tri-square in a couple of positions. When you're trying to mark a piece of timber square all the way around, it's important that you got your face and edge markings on it. Then when you're using your tri-square, you take the body of the tri-square and the blade, you put the body always against a face or an edge side. Never any side that isn't a face or an edge, always the face and edge. So if I'm squaring this one round, you have the body which is pushed up against that edge. So this has to be a perpendicular line. 90 degrees. That's it there. Flip the timber, carry on the outside of the blade with your line. Flip your timber, but this is not an edge. So now you're going to flip your tri-square once, and you can still see from this side, we can see our line here, and that's what we're going to work from. On the outside of the blade, tri-square stays that way, flip the timber again. Now the body is against the face, and the blade, you're going to work on the outside of that blade. You can see the body is up against the face and it's properly square against that. So this has to be a perpendicular line. And you got a square line going around. The light is a little difficult to see the pencil line here with the camera mark. But I'll mark that up off of that line there. As always, label your timber before you start marking out any further and cutting. We're going to have a face on this one and our edge, a face here and our edge side. These are our reference points and these are where we're going to measure from. So it's really important to do it now before you start measuring out. What I'll also do is label this. This is going to go in this way. So I'm going to call this one the top. And this one maybe the T. It's nice that they're different colors. I can tell the difference, but they're not always different colors if you're working on this. To work out how far to cut your timber down or across here, just put your timber on it. Allow some extra. It's always better to allow a little extra to be able to cut off. That's a bit much. 5 to 8 mil is ideal. If you try and put that up flat, some people like to put it on the edge of the bench there and have those flush. It's very difficult to cut here absolutely precisely to finish with a finish flush here. So allow an extra 5 mil there. Then when you put it together like this, you're not going to draw a line across here. It may be a straight line, but it's not going to be a right angle line. It's not going to be a 90-degree line. So you need to just mark your timber. As small as that. Then you'll square this one round from that point. That's your timber squared round there. So this is going to slot down here. Now we have to mark the other piece of timber. We want it approximately, we want this almost in the middle. So if we line up our timber there and put a small mark on the outside of one side, across the other side, you've now got your 2 marks on the outside of the timber. And then square those round. When you're squaring round, it's helpful to put your pencil line on your mark and then take your square, slide it up to the pencil line. So we've marked up the outside of our timber there and how much we're going to cut down here. We've squared them round. Next thing is how much are we going to cut off to get our joint working. Well, timber works really well when you have it divided by 3. However, it doesn't always evenly divide by 3. So one of these is 19.5 and the other is 20 mil wide. But we're going to have them flush at the end because we're going to measure off of the face sides. So with that, we don't have a 6.6 wide chisel. So you go to the nearest chisel. Here's a 6 mil chisel. That'll be close enough. And that's what we're going to use. We're going to use the combination marking gauge. And this is what we're going to use to mark it up. When you're measuring your 2 pins for your mortise, this is a mortise marking gauge. That's a marking gauge. When you're doing the mortise side, take the chisel and do it not between the pins, but to the points of the pins. So if that's right up there at the points of those pins, that's what we're looking for. That's fixed on there. I like the Irwin marking gauges because you have the adjuster down here, it's out of the way. Some of them have the adjuster here. I find it a bit awkward. This is a nice one. Next, we want to mark out the width of the timber, or the halfway mark. Where is that going to go halfway? So we could measure it or get an approximation. If that's approximately halfway, you check it out, tighten that up by putting 2 marks in your timber there. Let's do it up here because we're going to be marking this anyway. So 2 marks there on your timber. And when I'm putting those marks in, I don't want a gap here between the body or the block and the timber. And you're going to turn that round. And if those 2 marks fit into the original ones, you're good to go. But if they're pretty close, that's all right. Because everything's going to be measured off the face side. So if it's slightly out, at least it's going to be the same all the way around. So now we've measured our marking gauge. It's set. We've measured that once, and then you're going to mark everything from that. What you want to avoid is multiple measurements. If we were to measure this each time and measure across the timber here and then across it here and then measure this one across the timber, that gives us multiple opportunities to measure a fraction out each time. So avoid using this and measuring all your cuts. Measure a marking device such as a marking gauge, then it's set. You've measured it, checked your measurement twice or 3 times. It's measured, it's done, then it's fixed, and then it's the marking gauge that you continually use so that when everything gets marked up, it gets marked up the same. I'm always trying to stress the importance of marking out to my students. It's so important because if you've measured out and marked out incorrectly, you are 100% guaranteed to cut incorrectly if you follow your lines. So measuring and marking out is absolutely vital. You've increased your chances enormously to cut on those lines properly. Measure twice, cut once. That's a lie. Measure 3 or 4 times, cut once. Marking out your joints is hugely important. I'd put 60% of the effort goes into the marking out because you practice your cutting continually. And that's easy, relatively easy. But what's challenging is the marking out and getting it accurate. And measure twice, cut once is a lie. It should be measure 3, 4 times, cut once. So every time you've done your marking out, double and triple check your work. So when we line them up like this, we can see that the middle is going to go on this piece and the outside is going to go on these pieces. And being a simple bridle joint, if you get this right on this one, loads of the rest are absolutely simple to follow then. Let's get cutting. Make use of the clamps and vices that you have to mark your material. More hands the better. We're going to start by marking the top piece, and we're going to put the timber in at a slight angle. We've got the timber in the vise at a slight angle. I'm going to take the marking gauge, and this is the block or the stock, and this is the stem. So it's important that the block is always against the face side or an edge side. So from here, we're going to put it against this, and there's going to be no gap between the timber and the block. Then tighten that up. Then you can mark down the side of that timber there and put a pencil line in it when you've done it. The block against the face. There's no gap here. I'm not even running the pins on it now. And the primary focus is that there is no gap here. A lot of people get hooked up on looking at the pins, and the pins follow the grain and it's out. What's really important is the block, I keep repeating it, is the block is against the face without a gap. It's solid against it. Then you are getting parallel lines. That's its purpose, is to create these parallel lines running down here. It's helpful to put a couple of dents where you want to stop. There's a tip for you. A couple of dents where you want to stop. Because when you run the marking gauge down, then when it hits those dents, it stops. Stops short of the line instead of going beyond it. Oops. I should have tightened that up a bit tighter. When this is done, now you're going to mark out your waist at this point. So the waist here is going to be the middle piece. We're going to remove this middle bit. If you don't mark it now, it gets confusing later. That's the waist side. Because I'm right-handed, I like to have the block in the right hand, and I put the face side of that out to the right. This time I'm going to put a couple of dents where I want to stop, and that timber is going to run down, or sorry, that marking gauge is going to run down that timber. Draw your lines in. This time the waist is going to be the outside. That's going to get cut away. That's going. When turning it, keep watching where that face is. Now the face is still on this side. If I turn it that way and I put it here, the block isn't on the face. That's a very easy mistake to make, and it often happens. But you'll end up having the timbers not fitting together correctly. So it's hugely important to keep watching where that face side is. Marked it here. Flip that timber. We still have our face out here. Mark your waist. Cutting out the T part is a good place to start. And when you're cutting this one, because you're not cutting all the way through the timber, we don't need the bench hook anymore. So we can pop this in the vise. Have it leveled up. And start cutting. On the waist side of the line. When I've cut down a little, I want to check that my other timber is going to fit in there. Now that's actually going to be pretty tight. So I may want to go just a fraction closer to my line. When I've cut one here, it's going to be the same as we've been doing the half flaps, so you can check out the other videos. There's a link to the tutorials prior to this, and all the steps are repeated. We're going to put a lot of relief cuts in here now, and when we've cut those relief cuts, we'll chisel it out. Not exactly tall enough to break out, but they're close enough. I want to take my chisel, hold it by the neck, and I'm going to have the back of it against this cheek here. I'm going to push it up against the timber here because I want to cut those fibres in here, but I don't want to drag that out the edge of the timber, so I'm going to push it in that way and then pull it here as well. So it crosses there, crosses that one. So when that cuts down into that corner there, it cuts the fibres, then it makes it easier for these little pieces to come out. Hugely important, both hands behind the chisel. Don't hold it like this. The vice has got it. You don't want your finger in front of that. So both hands behind the chisel. We're going to go 2/3 of the way across, turn our timber, make life easy for ourselves, come at it from this direction. We don't want to go out over that edge because the back will split, or it's likely to split. It doesn't have to, but it could do, and we want to avoid it. So we've prepared the T, and we've got quite a tight joint on that one. Let me check if it's square. And we're going to prepare the top. So with this one, we want to cut the middle bit out. No different to any of the half lap joints. We're going to use the same procedure. With our 4 steps. So it starts with the timber straight up, and we get a curved line on that waist side. Get that tight in there. This waist is alright. The metal waist is better. So whilst I have it, instead of coming down one side and then going the other, I'll do both. Right, so that one's there. Then step two, we're going to be able to see both these lines down here and down here. So now I'm going to cut that way. More than 45. I want to get a steeper angle on that point. I can still see down there. Step 3. Stop moving. It's in there. I'm going to get quite close to my line down the bottom. Not exactly. Clean that out with a chisel afterwards. I'm going to take the coping saw and that's going to cut in here. This blade will cut on the pull. And I'm going to get quite close to the end. Level that out. There we have it. We're a bit off. We're okay on that side. We're now going to clean this up with the chisel. We need a mallet. So checking your work as you go along. Checking your work as you're going along, we've got our edge here. We're going to drop this into it and see if that sits in there nicely. Well, that's close to my line. On that side as well. It looks alright inside. Let's see if we can line these up. So there's our bridle joint, and we check it for square, do it off the edge, put it in there. Pleased with that. Oops. So there's our bridle joint, and we check that for square across there. We got pretty flush face, or the back was alright. Got our marking out, and we have a joint which is a sturdy, good joint. Where this is commonly used, you would get them on shed windows. Tie that in there a little bit more. Cheap doors, shed windows, good places for them, but it's the basis of other joints where you have the timber going across three ways, and it's a really nice joint. A bridle joint. Happy woodworking! Let me know how you get on with that one. That's the bridle joint. That's the basis of our more difficult joints as we go forward, and we'll get into other more challenging joints, mortise and tenons, and even hidden ones as well. Great for furniture making, but even just to build up your skills in the woodworking. Hand tools first before you get on to power tools. Let me know how you get on. Really like to see how you found this one. It's a great beginner joint. And check out the tutorials online. So the tutorials will build you up to this point. This is the beginning of the more advanced joinery, and then build you on from here. Be sure to see the tutorials. Be sure to watch through the whole video and check out all the tips and tricks as I go right through to reduce your work. See you in the next one. Happy woodworking.